you mentioned in a slide that there's a major issue in terms of diagnosis of febrile disease in the Kenyan setting that you were in. I just wanted to ask you, how much of that, obviously your whole thing is about the inadequate diagnostics that are present, how much of that misdiagnosis is down to funding pressure at the doctor level, at the physician level, in terms of the funding that they're, that's driving them, that's allowing them to be in that place, is coming from an NGO setting or someone who's involved in malaria or in a certain disease. So that's kind of biasing the diagnosis. How much of that is involved in that? And there's a reason why I'm asking that. I'll come to that.
So my sense is, in the settings that I've worked in, not a lot. So they're government health facilities using government-approved tests, and I'm not sure what happens at the government level in terms of approving particular tests. I think most of the drive is coming from the patients actually, rather than anywhere else. People wanting a diagnosis, and so when that's the case, we're relying on a set of poorly performing tests, many of which give false positive results. Then they often get a diagnosis, but it's often incorrect.
Okay. I was going to ask, in terms of communication challenge back into the patient group or the physicians group in that setting, is there a role for you, for your effort, for the SEEDS effort, to have a communication channel open to make people aware of that, to change that kind of mindset?
So there's certainly work by colleagues at Glasgow who are talking about this idea that, and this is obviously an idea that's been around for a long time, but that not every fever is malaria, and to think about zoonoses. That's useful, but as I said in my talk, we're still limited by the diagnostics that are available for a lot of zoonotic diseases at the health centre level, and as Victor said as well, a sort of basic lack of understanding of the epidemiology of a lot of these diseases in the settings where they occur.
Okay. I mean, from the floor, is there any input to Will? I'm asking that because Will has to go. He has to catch a train to Glasgow. So thank you. If there's a microphone for Professor Burry, thank you.
Diagnostics, we come back, and I'll repeat that twice this evening. We come back to local knowledge and knowing the local circumstances, because in many countries, in Central Africa, for instance, the lab techs actually are financed through the diagnostic procedure, because the salary never arrives, or arrives like 6 months late. So you there have another challenge, that actually people, they come to the hospital, they expect that the diagnosis is posed, and actually the hospital profits, even if treatment would be for free. Certain neglected diseases are actually treated for free, but the diagnosis is not, and the lab tech is relying on that. And before you're running through your train, I would like to laud you for having brought up the brucellosis, leptospira, rickettsia thing, because this is something that is way underestimated, in my opinion, because nobody's looking. It's again this case, if you don't look, it doesn't exist. I became aware of it because I have a new boss at Swiss TPH who actually has worked in Southeast Asia for 12 years, and he is coming back and tells us now, and our doctors, like, are you guys blind? So looking into that, I think, very neglected diseases, because nobody cares about them.
That's very encouraging to hear, and hopefully we can perhaps continue that in terms of emails with each other, and to continue that and further that between Christian and Will. There's another question from Lawrence as well.
Just to complement this, because we have exactly the same dilemma. We roughly estimate that people, there are several articles. There is one that have been published by Uganda that explain why clinicians still treat for malaria even if the diagnostic test is negative. So it's a combination, as Christian said, the patient coming here to receive treatment, so I cannot leave the patient going out. And then there are other publications and building more evidence that whatever is the result, most of these patients, because there is nothing after, and nobody, clinician, don't really know which kind of disease they should invest, then you find out that most of this group of unknown fever or how to diagnose fever, meaning without clear clinical sign, receive malaria treatment on a general practice and antibiotics. And most of the time, malaria treatment is not adapted because there is no malaria. And even worse, and was demonstrated by Valérie Dacremont, even the type of antibiotics might not be the adequate one. So in MSF, we really, it's now 3 years, we're really entering in this debate on we need to go further and we need to have alternative testing, we need to be able to know the epidemiological profile, and we need to put and to outline that in Africa specifically, not all fever are malaria. So it was just to complete that we have currently work ongoing on epidemiological profile in Guinea-Bissau, and surprisingly, we detect the Q fever outbreak during 3 months, and now we have a lot of rickettsia, we have a lot of adenovirus, where we have exactly what you described.
So perhaps that's quite encouraging to hear. Perhaps we could put you in touch as well in terms of because you have to leg it. That's why I'm saying,
really sorry.
I think you should, because you will miss it otherwise. So yeah,
Okay, well done.
I think a round of applause for Will. Yeah, good story. Yeah. Thanks, Will, and please let us know you've got back safely. Stranded somewhere up north. Okay, so yeah, that's Will.
I kind of had a question on the back of
Yeah.
that. I was just wondering, in terms of these neglected things and zoonoses, what if there's any sort of metabonomic data and sort of biomarkers that can be extracted from urine or something like that on the basis of that, or if you can tell from biomarkers of the drugs that people are taking if they're taking the wrong one. I mean, this is just off the top of my head, and it's not. I just wondered if anyone knows.
Any input
If
into that?
it was
In
them.
terms of studies that are out there, perhaps from Professor Rohit?
No. Okay. Sorry. Just
Perhaps another case for a pooled resource.
it was. Well, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a question
That's a
because
good
I've.
question.
We can do it, but the problem it's there is no on a daily basis.
Yeah,
inside
yeah.
of the structure.
Yeah.
They just spray drugs
Yeah. No. Of course.
based on what they think. So
Yeah. Well, it was kind of what I tried to look at markers for schisto and SDH in Zanzibar again, looking at urines, and what we found there was we ended up, everyone had too many infections basically, so there wasn't a biomarker. However, what we did find was that everyone had masses of paracetamol in their system. And so people were like, I'm sick, I'm just going to take this. And so I wondered if it was just an aside point, sorry. Just,
That's a fair point. In terms of we often hear, I wanted to pick up on something that Victor said. I mean, we'd contact you with regards to that paper because we thought it was quite interesting to see. We hear a lot about driving sustainability through knowledge transfer, the new kind of frontier in endemic regions. So we had the tech transfer experiment, hasn't really worked, knowledge transfer. And so the question was, and part of the paper, was that, how much should the standardization happen before we launch knowledge transfer in terms of, building resource capacity in endemic regions? Is the standardization issue first? How much should they be involved in that? What type of kind of dynamic, is evolving there?
I mean, my experience from that study and also from a similar study we conducted on echinococcosis across 5 labs in the 5 endemic countries in the region, Argentina, Chile, Uruguay, Peru, and is that you need to prove, you need first to throw the evidence showing that there are some discrepancies, and then my experience at least, that jump immediately into recognizing the problem and coming up together to standardize it on SOPs. We've seen that actually with echinococcosis more dynamic situation actually than rabies. With echinococcosis, the guys, the heads of the different labs, the moment they knew the results from this proficiency exercise, they start having calls together, and they approach us, PAHO, to coordinate a meeting to actually develop new regional guidelines and new regional procedures. And so in my experience, you need to first throw the evidence on the table for these guys to recognize they've got a problem, and most of them they respond properly.
I'm just wondering. You said you said have we neglected rabies till the end of the? We gave an award in February to Mission Rabies for their app, in terms of the potential impact, in terms of cohesion with the various different stakeholder groups, the different communities involved in rabies, from various perspectives, including post-vaccination perspectives, landscaping. So I guess the question is, and this is a question for Fiona as well, what type of technologies do you think are going to impact onto what you're doing outside of your PCR, outside of your in the biobanking, that could bring these different stakeholders? You're going to a vector control perspective, but everyone hears about integration in terms of the fight against NTDs. So what type of technologies or approaches can bring the different stakeholders together? I guess I'll ask Victor that first.
I thought that was a question for the... No?
No, it's for you, Victor. Don't worry.
Well, again, talking from my experience, in the region we generated these two networks. One was on the Allan networks, but in the region coordinated by PAHO, as it happens in other regions, we generated these networks on echinococcosis and rabies. We had a number of working groups working in parallel. We invited, academia, we invited the industry, the pharmaceutical companies, the ministries were in all cases represented. I think what you need is a champion, basically. I used to work for DEFRA, and I experienced, the need for champions for every project. That move goes, a long way. So we had these champions in the region for rabies, people with a vision, and how. I'll tell you some story. When we generated these initiatives for the control and elimination of echinococcosis in South America, we only look at echinococcosis granulosus because it's the most important of the problems in the region. And we held these meetings on a regular basis. We had all these working groups on diagnostic, advocacy, you name it, communication, etc. But there was this lady from Argentina, so dynamic, so enthusiastic, and she approached me and said, I want echinococcosis neotropical to be part of this initiative. And there was a lot of resistance from the old guys in the community saying, no, we shouldn't mix these things. But she was so pushy, she was so enthusiastic. I couldn't say no in the front, before an audience. I said, by all means, just come on and you lead. And she did. Neotropical was finally accepted in the list of diseases in Argentina, for example. For the first time, we're collecting data from several countries, all because of a champion that she was, resilient and keep pushing and pushing. So that is my experience. It really changed the story over there. Yeah.
Fantastic. Fiona, from your point of view, in terms of the vector control crowd, the MDA crowd, potentially the schisto vaccine crowd, diagnostics?
Yeah, I think one of the things sort of on the elimination front then, I've been involved with ZEST, which is the Zanzibar Elimination of Schisto Transmission, so that's NHM and Swiss TPH and Ministry of Health and all sorts of other partners. But there then we're just kind of coming to the end of a large amount of funding on that. We had a meeting in January that was looking with government people as well. And the problem that we have there is that there's all these ideas. We've trained people in snail control, in kind of behavioural intervention studies, so community-led projects. And all of this is going on, and unless you have that buy-in, then it's just going to bounce back. And very quickly, I mean, the program's doing really well, and we've brought it down to very low percentages. Prevalence of infection, there's hardly any sort of hematuria anymore that's visible. And it's that buy-in and going, actually, we're getting grants after grants to do this mass scale thing. So that's one point. The other point would be with the technology, and as probably was discussed about vaccine development and drug development as well. You've got one drug, and we're currently using one molluscicide as well. So in terms of vector control, it's something that appears to be working, but there's other ecological impacts there as well, where people's diet is based on fish. You need to spray very focally, very carefully, and it's not necessarily the best way of getting rid of the snails or cercaria in the water. So we need to kind of try and push companies maybe to be thinking long-term on vector control if we're actually going to reach elimination, particularly when you're dealing with something that's hermaphroditic snail. You only need one snail and you can fill up a pond again.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very interesting point. You're saying maybe that's one for industry to chip into in terms of how much integration to vector control would you anticipate? And I'd like to ask that to Jim, actually. So I know you're doing something malaria and schisto, but I mean, is that on the horizon for Merck, the vector control issue?
I would say the far horizon. Okay, we're still working on feasibility.
Yes.
The hardest part, we just said it, you just said it.
Yeah.
No, of course.
That's a very honest answer. Yeah.
I mean, we have, saying that we have been donated for the Zanzibar project from Bayer, then they gave us sort of 3 tons of niclosamide.
Yeah.
So that's it. It's there, but it's a formulation that hasn't changed in.
Yeah.
So, but part of that is that snails are passive. It's not like mosquitoes. They're not getting out and biting you.
Yeah.
They're not annoying. They're just there.
Technology's there.
Yeah.
You could do it with the technology. Everybody, the microscopy isn't so bad. And if you have a technology that mimics microscopy, like flow imaging, you could do it, but you can't do it on a grand scale because of the cost. And so what you need is the industry to come together with the governments and work out a way to do the feasibility. They certainly have done it in the AIDS market. Okay, look at all the advancements in AIDS. It could be done with schisto, it could be done with rabies. It's just a case of marshalling the forces.
I guess we're talking about novel partnerships, I guess, outside of the traditional
Well,
pharma.
to get started, it's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Okay, if you look back in history, the early days of AIDS, everybody was saying, okay, well, it's not really a health issue. It's this, it's that. We put it down, and then it became an epidemic. And I think you have epidemics in schisto, and I think you have epidemics in rabies, but the word isn't out there yet. There's not enough people screening.
Yeah.
Governments have the money they can invest into. Technology can be developed. It's just got to get.
I mean, that's an interesting challenge in its own right. I'd like to say thank you very, very much to both speakers, Will in his absence as well, in terms of some great presentations. Thank you.